I always figured my 62-year-old birthday would be just another milestone, maybe a little special because my son was with me. But I never thought it would become the day I uncovered a terrifying betrayal within my own family. My name is Eleanor, and that Friday night, my son Ethan took me to my favorite local Italian restaurant in Chicago, Illinois. It was a cozy spot, with soft lighting that cast a warm, golden glow on the antique wooden tables. The aroma of garlic and basil filled the air, bringing back memories of simpler times. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, sat across from me with that smile that always seemed a little forced. The restaurant was busy, packed with families and couples celebrating the weekend. Ethan had ordered a bottle of the red wine I loved so much. He poured our glasses, looking at me with affection. "Mom, you look radiant tonight." For a brief moment, I felt genuinely happy and loved. We ordered our favorite dishes. I chose the chicken parmesan, as I always did. Ethan got spaghetti and meatballs, and Chloe opted for a Caesar salad, claiming she was on a diet. Throughout dinner, I noticed something odd about her behavior. Her fingers drummed nervously on the table, and she checked her cell phone frequently. Every time Ethan turned to talk to me, she watched us with an expression I couldn't quite place. When it was time for the toast, Ethan stood up with his glass. "To my mother, for being the strongest woman I know." His words warmed my heart. Chloe raised her glass too, but I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "To Eleanor," she said in a husky voice, "for being such a special mother-in-law." The pause before the word special bothered me, but I decided to let it go. It was right then, as I was about to bring the glass to my lips, that I saw someone approaching our table discreetly. It was a young waitress with her brown hair pulled back. She leaned in as if to wipe something, and with an almost imperceptible movement, slid a small, folded piece of paper next to my plate. Before quickly stepping away, she gave me an intense, almost desperate look. My heart instantly started racing. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper under the table, keeping it hidden. The message was written in clear, urgent letters. "Don't drink this. Your life is in danger. Trust me." The world around me seemed to slow down. The sounds of the restaurant grew distant, like I was underwater. My first thought was that it was a sick joke, but there was something in that waitress's eyes that conveyed an alarming seriousness. I looked at my glass of wine, which seconds earlier I had been eager to drink. Now, the red liquid seemed to hold something sinister. I managed to keep a straight face while my mind raced. Ethan and Chloe kept talking, completely oblivious to what had just happened. "Excuse me," I said, with a voice I hoped sounded natural. "I need to go to the ladies' room for a minute." I got up on shaky legs, slipping the paper into my jacket pocket. In the bathroom, I reread the message several times, as if the words might magically change. There was no signature, just that direct, terrifying warning. I took a deep breath, looking at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, and my eyes showed the fear I was trying to hide. When I returned to the table, I forced myself to act normal. But inside, I was in full panic. I watched Ethan and Chloe with new eyes. My son seemed completely normal, talking excitedly about his plans to renovate their house. But Chloe, there was something different about her. Her eyes darted nervously between my glass and my face, as if she were waiting for something. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. When Ethan turned to call the waitress for more bread, I seized the moment of distraction. With one casual, quick motion, I switched my glass with Chloe's. The liquid was identical, the same red wine we had been drinking all evening. "Finally," I said, raising what was now my glass. "A toast to this family moment." Ethan smiled and raised his glass. Chloe, without noticing the switch, raised hers too, the one that had originally been mine. We drank at the same time. The wine tasted as it always did, but I could barely focus on the flavor. I was watching Chloe intently, looking for any sign that something was wrong. At first, nothing happened. We kept eating and chatting. Ethan was telling me about a promotion he hoped to get, and I was talking about my plan to visit my sister in Seattle, Washington. Chloe participated in the conversation, but she seemed increasingly restless. It was exactly 5 minutes after the toast when everything started. Chloe grabbed her stomach with a confused expression. "I'm feeling a little weird," she muttered. Ethan immediately showed concern, asking if she was okay. She shook her head, saying she probably ate something that didn't agree with her at lunch. But then, her face started to visibly pale. Her hands were trembling, not from nervousness like before, but uncontrollably. "I'm really not okay," she whispered, and I saw beads of sweat forming on her forehead, despite the comfortable temperature of the restaurant. Ethan stood up instantly, taking hold of her shoulders. "Honey, what's wrong?" he asked, alarmed. I remained seated, watching the scene with a mix of horror and a terrible understanding of what was happening. Chloe tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She slumped back into the chair, breathing heavily. Her eyes were glazed over, and her skin had turned a sickening gray color that terrified me. "Call 911!" I yelled at Ethan, though my voice sounded strangely calm, considering the situation. Panic spread through the restaurant as the other diners realized something serious was happening. While we waited for the paramedics, my mind kept repeating the words from that note. "Your life is in danger." And now, I knew, with a certainty that chilled my blood, that the person who had been in danger was me. The ambulance ride to the hospital was a nightmare that seemed endless. Chloe had completely lost consciousness, and the paramedics were working frantically to stabilize her. Ethan held my hand in the back seat, his eyes reflecting terror and confusion. I kept the waitress's note firmly clenched in my fist, as if it were the only proof I wasn't going crazy. The smell of antiseptic hit me as soon as the ambulance doors opened. As the doctors rushed Chloe inside, Ethan and I were directed to those uncomfortable plastic chairs in the waiting room. The fluorescent lights created a cold, impersonal environment, accentuating the sense of unreality that dominated me. "I don't get what happened," Ethan mumbled repeatedly, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of desperation. "She was fine until a moment ago. Maybe it was something she ate." I remained silent. I couldn't tell him about the note yet, not until I was sure of what had really happened. But internally, I knew this wasn't simple food poisoning. The waitress's words echoed in my mind like a persistent alarm. After what felt like endless hours, a young doctor with a beard approached us. His serious expression announced news he didn't know how to deliver. "Are you all family of Chloe Miller?" he asked, his voice measured. "I'm the husband," Ethan immediately replied. "This is my mother." "How is Chloe?" The doctor sat down across from us, which instantly made me realize the gravity of the situation. "Your wife is stable for now, but we need to talk about what caused her collapse." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The results of the blood work indicate the presence of digoxin in extremely high levels." Ethan frowned, confused. "Digoxin? What is that?" "It's a heart medication," the doctor explained. "In normal doses, it helps regulate heart rhythm, but in the amount we found in her system, it is potentially lethal." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "Are you saying someone poisoned her?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I can't make that determination," the doctor replied cautiously. "But I can state that this amount of digoxin did not get into her system by accident. We will have to contact the authorities to investigate." Ethan stood up abruptly, pacing the small space. "That's impossible," he muttered. "No one would want to hurt Chloe. She's a good person." I knew the answer, but I couldn't say it yet. I needed more information. "Doctor," I asked, "is it possible that someone could have put this medication in a drink?" "Certainly," he replied. "Digoxin can dissolve in liquids, and in this case, we also detected alcohol in her system, which could intensify the toxic effects." That was the confirmation I needed. I pulled the paper from my pocket with shaky hands and showed it to Ethan. His eyes widened as he read the words. "Mom, where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I told him everything, the waitress, the message, my decision to switch the glasses. With every word, I watched the color drain from Ethan's face. When I finished, he collapsed into the chair as if he'd lost all his strength. "It can't be," he whispered. "Are you saying that someone tried to poison you?" "That is exactly what I am saying," I replied firmly, though inside I was shaking. The doctor, who had listened to our conversation, intervened with a grave expression. "I'll notify the police immediately. And we'll need to do blood work on both of you as well, to ensure you haven't ingested anything dangerous." When the doctor left, Ethan and I remained in a heavy silence. I could see his mind working, processing the information, reaching conclusions he refused to accept. "Ethan," I said softly, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." He looked at me with eyes full of pain and confusion. "Have you noticed anything strange about Chloe's behavior lately?" "Anything different at home?" Ethan took a long time to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was just a whisper. "Several months ago, she started getting really concerned about your health." He paused as if he didn't want to continue. "What kind of concerns?" I pressed. "She said she saw you confused sometimes, that you would forget things, that maybe we should consider care options for you." The words left him as if they were painful to pronounce. My blood ran cold. "Care options. A nursing home," Ethan murmured, unable to look me in the eyes. "She said she had researched some really good places, that it would be better for you to have professional assistance." "Ethan," I said with a trembling voice, "I don't have memory problems. I'm not confused. I'm perfectly fine." "I know," he whispered. "My God, I know. But she was so convincing. She showed me articles about early-onset dementia, talked about warning signs, and I wanted to believe she was just worried about you." "What else?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Ethan covered his face with his hands. "Last month, she suggested that you should give me power of attorney over your finances. She said it was just a precaution, in case something happened to you." His voice failed, and I had been about to agree. I thought it was the right attitude. I felt a wave of nausea. The whole picture was beginning to form, and it was more horrifying than I had imagined. Chelsea had not only planned to poison me, but had set the stage so my death would seem inevitable, even expected. "Is there anything else?" I continued, my voice almost inaudible. 3 weeks ago, I found bottles of pills in her purse. When I asked, she said they were vitamins for herself. But now that I think about it, I never saw her take them. Just then, a nurse approached us. "Miss Fiona?" "That's me," I replied automatically. "The police are here and would like to speak with you. The doctor also wants to inform you about something we found in the additional tests." We followed the nurse to a private room, where 2 detectives and the doctor we had met earlier were waiting. His expression was even more serious than before. "We performed more detailed tests," he began, "and we found something disturbing. Miss Fiona not only had digoxin in her system, but also traces of other heart medications. It appears she had been ingesting small amounts over a prolonged period." My world reeled. "Are you saying someone has been gradually poisoning me?" I asked. "It is the most likely explanation for what we are observing in the tests," the doctor confirmed. One of the detectives, a middle-aged woman with gray hair, leaned forward. "Ms. Viana, have you been taking any medication recently? Have you noticed any unusual symptoms?" I reflected on the last few months. The occasional dizziness I attributed to age. The fatigue I considered normal. The moments of confusion that worried me, but I chose to ignore. "Yes," I whispered. "I've been feeling things, but I thought it was just part of getting older." Ethan held my hand. "Mom, why didn't you say anything to me?" "Because I didn't want to worry you," I answered truthfully. and because Chloe assured me it was normal for my age. The words hung in the air like an accusation, and that's when I realized the terrible truth. My own daughter-in-law was trying to kill me slowly and systematically, while convincing my son that I was losing my mind. The monster hadn't come from outside. It was living within my own family. The following days unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. Chloe remained in the intensive care unit, stable but still unconscious. Ethan didn't leave my side, as if he feared something might happen to me if he left me alone. Guilt was visibly consuming him. I could see it in every new wrinkle that appeared on his tired face. Detective Matos visited me 3 times over the next 4 days. She was a meticulous woman, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through lies. Each conversation revealed more pieces of the terrible puzzle that my life had been over the last few months. "Miss Viana," she told me during our last meeting, "we investigated your daughter-in-law's medical history. What we found is disturbing." We were sitting in my living room, the same place where Chloe had so often come to care for me during my supposed episodes of confusion. Now, every corner of that room felt contaminated by her lies. "Chloe worked as a medical assistant for 5 years before marrying your son," the detective continued. "She had access to medications and perfectly understood the effects of different substances." Ethan, sitting next to me, seemed more distraught each day. "But why would she hurt my mother? I never saw any problem between them." The detective exchanged a significant look with me before answering. "Mr. Viana, we checked your mother's financial records. Are you aware that you are the sole beneficiary of her will?" "Of course," Ethan replied. "She's my mother, but that doesn't mean anything. I never, ever wished anything to happen to her for money." "No, but your wife knew about the inheritance," the detective said softly. "And according to our investigations, she had been pressuring you to have your mother make changes to her legal documents." I remembered all those seemingly innocent conversations where Chloe suggested it would be prudent for me to put my affairs in order. How she insisted on accompanying me to medical appointments, always with that worried smile and a voice full of false compassion. "There's something more," the detective continued. "We found correspondence on Chloe's computer. She had been searching for nursing homes specializing in dementia patients, very expensive places where patients rarely receive family visits." My stomach churned. Was she planning to institutionalize me? "It appears so, but not just that. We also found searches about how to accelerate cognitive decline in the elderly, and methods to make a death look natural in patients with heart conditions." Ethan stood up abruptly, walking to the window. His shoulders were shaking. "My God," he mumbled. "What kind of monster is she?" But I needed to know more. In the last few days, I had been remembering incidents that at the time seemed insignificant, but now took on a sinister meaning. "Detective Matos?" I said. "I think I need to tell you about other things that happened." For the next hour, I recounted everything. How Chloe had started visiting me more frequently a few months ago, always bringing tea or a special snack. How after these visits, I would feel strangely tired and confused. How she had subtly started questioning my memory in front of Ethan, saying things like, "Eleanor, don't you remember you already told me that story yesterday?" Or, "Oh, sweetheart, you just asked me that 5 minutes ago." And I started doubting myself, I explained. I thought maybe I really was losing my memory. Ethan turned from the window, his face twisted in horror. "And I believed her," he whispered. "Every time she came home and told me you'd had an episode, I believed it. I thought she was being a good wife by caring for you." Detective Matos was taking notes meticulously. "Do you remember any specific episode?" "Yes," I replied, feeling rage start to replace the fear. 2 months ago, Chloe came for lunch with me. She brought homemade soup, said she'd made too much and didn't want to waste it. After eating it, I felt so sick that I had to lie down. When Ethan arrived that evening, she told him she had found me confused, that I didn't remember having lunch with her. "And what did you remember?" I perfectly remembered the lunch, but I felt so ill and disoriented that I couldn't defend myself. Ethan took me to the doctor the next day, but by then I was feeling better. The doctor said it was probably a stomach virus. Ethan collapsed into the chair, covering his face with his hands. "She was poisoning you gradually," he mumbled. I helped her convince you that you were losing your mind." "It's not your fault," I said, though inside I felt a complex mix of pain and understanding. "She's very good at manipulating. She manipulated me too." The detective closed her notebook. "Miss Fiona, there's something else you need to know. The waitress who gave you the note, Julia Roberts, is a nursing student. Her grandmother died 2 years ago in circumstances similar to what you are describing." My blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" Julia's grandmother began showing signs of confusion and cognitive decline. The family thought it was natural dementia. She was admitted to a nursing home, where she passed away 6 months later from heart failure. But Julia always suspected something wasn't right. And what does that have to do with me? The person who cared for Julia's grandmother, who convinced the family that she needed institutional care, was Chloe Miller. At the time, she used her maiden name, Chloe Stevens. The silence that followed was deafening. Estes slowly raised his head, his eyes full of horrified comprehension. "Are you saying, my wife, that she'd done this before?" "That's exactly what we're investigating," the detective confirmed. Julia recognized Chloe at the restaurant. She had been following her discreetly for several weeks, trying to figure out if her suspicions were correct. When she saw what looked like a familiar situation repeating itself, she decided to act. I thought of that young waitress who had saved my life, a stranger who showed more concern for my well-being than my own daughter-in-law. "Where is Julia now?" I asked. "I'd like to thank her." "She is fully cooperating with our investigation, and I believe she would like to speak with you too." Ethan finally spoke, his voice trembling with emotion. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I doubted you. I'm so sorry I let her do this to you." I went over to him and held his hands in mine. They were cold and shaking. "Ethan, listen to me. Chelsea is an expert manipulator. This is not your fault." "But I should have seen the signs," he insisted. "I should have known something was wrong." "How could you have known?" I asked. She presented herself as the perfect daughter-in-law, worried about her elderly mother-in-law. Anyone would have thought she was being kind. After the detective left, Ethan and I sat in silence for a long time. The weight of everything we had discovered was overwhelming. "Ethan," I said finally, "there's something you need to understand. All those months, when I was feeling confused and sick, the worst part wasn't the physical discomfort. The worst part was thinking I was disappointing you, that I was becoming a burden to you." His eyes filled with tears. "You were never a burden, Mom." "Never. I know that now. But in those moments, when Chloe told me she was worried about my mental deterioration, I felt like I was losing not only my sanity, but also your respect and your love." "She knew exactly where to strike," Ethan murmured. "She knew my greatest fear was losing you the same way I lost Dad." My ex-husband had passed away from Alzheimer's when Ethan was 25 years old. It had been a devastating experience for the whole family. Watching that strong, brilliant man gradually fade until he became a shadow of himself. "Chloe used that experience against us," I continued. "She knew you would be afraid that I would follow the same path as your father, and she took advantage of that fear to manipulate you." Ethan nodded slowly, and I fell for the trap completely. I was so afraid of seeing you deteriorate that I didn't question anything she told me. We hugged for a long time, sharing the pain and the relief of finally knowing the truth. Although the road ahead was uncertain and scary, at least now we knew what we were fighting against. Chloe woke up from her coma 4 days after drinking the poison originally meant for me. When Detective Matos called to inform me, I felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. On one hand, I was glad she hadn't died. No matter how monstrous her actions were, I didn't want to carry her death on my conscience. On the other hand, I knew her waking up meant I would have to face her face to face. "How is she?" I asked into the phone, my voice betraying my anxiety. Physically, she's recovering well, the detective replied. But mentally? Well, she's very agitated. She's been asking for her husband constantly, and when we informed her that you were fine, her reaction was intense. What kind of reaction? Complete denial. She insists there's been some kind of mistake, that she would never hurt anyone. She paused before continuing. The most concerning thing is that she has also been asking specifically for you, Miss Fiona. Do you want to see her? My stomach turned at the prospect. Do I have to see her? You are not obligated, but it could be useful for the case. Sometimes, when suspects are confronted directly by their victims, they reveal important information. I completely understand if you don't feel comfortable with it. I reflected for a moment. Part of me wanted to hide, pretend Chloe didn't exist, and let justice take its course without my direct participation. But another part, a stronger, more determined part, wanted to look her in the eyes and show her that she hadn't managed to destroy me. I'll go, I finally said. But I want Ethan to be there. Of course. Would tomorrow afternoon be convenient for you? That night, Ethan and I sat in my kitchen, drinking tea and mentally preparing for the imminent confrontation. He had become incredibly protective of me since we discovered the truth. It was almost as if he feared Chloe could hurt me, even from her hospital bed. Mom, he said softly, you don't have to do this. We can let the police and the lawyers handle everything. No, I need to, I replied, with more firmness than I felt. I need to see her. I need to understand how I could have been so blind for so long. You weren't blind, Ethan insisted. She's an expert manipulator. Maybe, but I also think a part of me didn't want to see the signs because I wanted to believe that I finally had a daughter-in-law who cared about me. The next day, as we entered the hospital, I felt like I was walking to my own execution. Detective Matos escorted us down corridors that smelled of disinfectant and medicine to the room where Chloe was being guarded. A police officer stood at the door, which gave me a slight feeling of security. When the detective opened the door and I saw Chloe for the first time since that night at the restaurant, all my mental preparation seemed to dissolve. She was pale and thinner, with tubes connected to her arm, but her eyes held the same calculating intensity they always had. Seeing me enter, her expression instantly changed to one of feigned vulnerability. "Eleanor," she said in a weak voice, extending her hand towards me. "Thank God you're okay. I was so worried." I remained standing near the door, refusing to approach her bed. Ethan positioned himself protectively between us. "Chloe," I said firmly, "we know what you did." Her look of confusion seemed genuine, but I had already learned what a good actress she was. "What are you talking about?" "I was the one who got sick. Someone tried to poison us." "No," I replied. "Someone tried to poison me, and that person was you." For the first time, I glimpsed something darker in her eyes, but she quickly hid it behind seemingly sincere tears. "Eleanor," she said, "I don't understand why you're accusing me of something so terrible. I love you like a mother. I would never harm you." "How did you love Julia Roberts' grandmother?" I asked, carefully watching her reaction. The change in her expression was instantaneous. The tears dried up. The vulnerability vanished, and for a moment, I saw the real Chloe. Cold, calculating, furious. "I don't know who you're talking about," she said, but her voice had lost all its feigned warmth. Ethan stepped forward. "Chloe, we found the medications in our house. We found your correspondence. We know about the money, about the documents you made my mother sign. We know everything." Chloe adjusted herself in the bed, and her mask of the innocent victim began to crumble completely. "Ethan, sweetheart, you need to understand. Everything I did was for us, for our future." "Our future?" he repeated, incredulously. "Your mother is old, Ethan. She doesn't have many good years left. Wouldn't it be better for her to enjoy her last years in a place where she receives appropriate care, while we build our life together, without the burden of constantly worrying about her?" The coldness with which she spoke about me, as if I were an inconvenient object, made me sick. "And the money?" Ethan asked. "Was this all about the money?" Chloe sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a child. Money is important, Ethan. Your mother isn't going to live forever, and when she's gone, why not make sure we're comfortable? She doesn't need all those savings in a nursing home. Are you talking about killing me? I intervened, my voice trembling yet firm. For the first time, Chloe stared at me directly with pure hatred. I'm talking about being practical in an inevitable situation. Like you were practical with Julia Roberts' grandmother? Her smile turned cruel. Helen Stevens was a lonely old woman who was going to die anyway. At least I made sure her last months were comfortable and that her money went to more useful hands. Her family visited her once a month, if she was lucky. I was the only one who really cared about her in the end. Ethan visibly trembled with rage. How many other people did you hurt, Chloe? I didn't hurt anyone, she replied coldly. I provided a peaceful transition for people who were already suffering. A peaceful transition? I repeated, incredulous. You call gradually poisoning elderly people to death a peaceful transition? I kept them comfortable, she insisted. No pain, no fear. It's more than most people can hope for at the end of their lives. Detective Matos, who had been quietly taking notes, finally spoke. Ms. Viana, are you admitting that you intentionally caused the death of Helen Stevens and that you plan to do the same to Eleanor Viana? Chloe realized too late what she had revealed. She tried to backtrack. No, I'm not. I was speaking hypothetically. I'm confused because of the medications, but the damage was already done. She had shown her true face, and everyone in that room had witnessed it. Chloe, I said, moving closer to the bed but staying out of her reach. I want you to know one thing. For months, you made me doubt my own sanity. You made me feel like I was a burden, like I was losing my worth as a person. But I survived, and I'm going to make sure you never get the chance to do this to anyone else. Her eyes filled with rage. Stupid old woman, she hissed. You should be grateful. I was going to give you a dignified death. Now you'll slowly rot in some cheap nursing home where no one cares about you. Ethan lunged toward her, but I put my hand on his arm to stop him. She's not worth it, I said softly. She can't hurt us anymore. When we left the room, I felt as if I had confronted the demon that had been haunting my life for months. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. How do you feel? Ethan asked me as we walked down the hall. Like I just woke up from a very long nightmare, I replied, and like I can finally start to heal. 6 months after that horrific night at the restaurant, I wake up every morning with a feeling I had forgotten existed. Peace. It's a strange feeling after so long living in constant fear, doubting my own mind, feeling like I was losing pieces of myself every day. My morning routine has changed completely. I no longer have to obsessively check if I locked the door or turned off the stove, because I trust my memory now. I don't have to question every decision I make, wondering if it's evidence of mental decline. I know my mind is clear. It always was clear. And that the confusion and forgetfulness were caused by poison, not illness. Chloe's trial lasted 3 intense weeks. I testified for 2 full days, telling my story to a jury who listened with a mixture of horror and compassion. Julia Roberts also testified, speaking bravely about her grandmother's death and her determination to find justice. Chloe tried to use an insanity defense, claiming she suffered from a personality disorder that made her unable to control her actions. But the prosecution presented evidence of years of meticulous planning, internet searches about poisons and murder methods, forged documents, and deliberate financial manipulation. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected, just a strange emptiness. A woman I once called family would spend the rest of her life in prison. And although I knew it was justice, I couldn't help but feel sadness for what could have been if Chloe had chosen a different path. After the trial, I decided to make major changes in my life. The first was moving. I couldn't continue living in the house where Chloe had poisoned me so many times. Every corner carried memories of those terrible months, and I needed a new space to build a new life. I found a charming little house near the lake in Lake Tahoe, Nevada, with a garden that allows me to spend hours working with my hands in the dirt. There's something profoundly healing about planting seeds and watching them grow, about creating life after being so close to losing it. Julia Roberts has become an important part of my new life. We meet regularly for coffee and have developed a friendship that goes far beyond the circumstances that brought us together. She's finishing nursing school, and I've been helping financially with her studies. It's my way of honoring the memory of her grandmother, Helen, and thanking her for saving my life. Ms. Viana, she told me during one of our recent visits, "There's something I want to tell you." "Tell me, sweetheart." "I've been thinking about specializing in geriatric care. I want to work with older people, help them maintain their dignity and independence as much as possible." "That's wonderful, Julia. What inspired that decision?" "You," she replied simply. "Seeing how you fought to reclaim your life, how you refused to be defined by what Chloe did to you, showed me that the elderly are not helpless victims. They are warriors who have survived decades of life and deserve respect and protection." Her words filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Knowing that my horrible experience could inspire something positive in the world gave purpose to all the pain I had suffered. I started speaking publicly about my experience, not to seek attention or sympathy, but to educate other families about the signs of elder abuse. It's surprising how many people approach me after lectures to say they recognize some of the patterns I describe in their own families. A 70-year-old woman told me her son-in-law had been pressuring her for access to her bank accounts, using the same type of manipulation Chloe used with me. Another family realized that their father's episodes of confusion always occurred after visits from his new caregiver. I can't save everyone, but if my story can prevent just one case of abuse, then everything I went through will have been worth it. Ethan and I worked together in family therapy and slowly built a new, deeper trust. The guilt he carried for doubting me, for letting Chloe manipulate him, had consumed him for several weeks after the trial. "Mom," he told me during one of our sessions, "I think a part of me always knew something wasn't right. But it was easier to believe your mind was deteriorating than to face the possibility that my wife was a liar." "Why was it easier?" the therapist asked. "Because if my mother was sick, I could be the hero who took care of her. But if Chloe was lying, that meant I had chosen poorly, that I had brought danger into my mother's life. That made me the villain of the story." It was painful to hear, but it was also a relief. Ethan had found the courage to be honest about his own fears and insecurities, and that allowed us to truly heal. Recently, Ethan started dating someone new, a woman named Sarah, who he met in a support group for family members of crime victims. At first, I worried about the impact that would have on our newly rebuilt relationship, but Sarah is genuinely wonderful. She is transparent, honest, and completely respects the boundaries Ethan and I have set. "Mom," Ethan told me last week, "I want you to know that I'll never let anyone hurt you again. I've learned to recognize the signs of manipulation, and I promise I'll always believe you when you tell me something isn't right." "Ethan," I replied, "I don't need you to protect me from everything. I just need you to trust me and my judgment. I am stronger than either of us thought. And it's true, I am stronger. The process of surviving Chloe's betrayal, of fighting for my sanity and my life, taught me things about myself I never knew. I'm 62 years old, but in many ways I feel like my real life is just beginning. I resumed activities I had abandoned during the months Chloe was poisoning me. I went back to my yoga classes, where my colleagues welcomed me with open arms. I joined a book club at the local library. I even started taking painting classes, something I'd always wanted to do, but never found the time for. Each new activity, each new friendship, each day I wake up without fear is a victory over what Chloe tried to do to me. One afternoon, while I was working in my garden, I found a letter in the mailbox. It had no return address, but I immediately recognized the handwriting. It was from Chloe, writing from prison. For a moment, I considered throwing it away unopened. I didn't owe her anything, and I wasn't obligated to read her words. But curiosity was stronger than my caution. The letter was brief and, as was typical of Chloe, completely self-centered. She didn't ask for forgiveness for what she had done. Instead, she complained about the prison conditions and insisted she had been misunderstood. It ended with a sentence that made me laugh, despite everything. I hope you appreciate the favor I tried to do for you. Even after being convicted of multiple crimes, Chloe still saw herself as the heroine of her own story. It was a perfect reminder of why she had been so dangerous, and why my decision to cut off all contact with her was the right one. I burned the letter in my fireplace that night, watching the words turn to ashes. It was symbolic. The last vestige of power Chloe had over me dissolved into smoke and was gone forever. This morning, as I drink my coffee on the porch of my new home, watching the sun rise over the lake, I reflect on everything I lost and everything I gained. I lost my innocence about the human capacity for evil. I lost the version of myself that believed kindness would always be recognized and rewarded. But I gained something much more valuable. I gained the absolute certainty of my own strength. I gained the wisdom that comes from surviving the unthinkable. I gained a deeper, more honest relationship with my son. And I gained the satisfaction of knowing that my experience is helping to protect other people. At 62 years old, I've learned that life can change in an instant. It can turn into a nightmare without warning. But it can also turn into something beautiful when you least expect it. The key is never to give up, to keep fighting, even when it seems all hope is lost. I am Eleanor Viana. I survived an attempted murder by my own family. And I'm here to tell my story, not as a victim, but as a warrior who refused to be silenced. And every day I wake up, free, sane, and in control of my own life is my sweetest revenge against those who thought they could destroy me. Now, if you like this story, go ahead and click on the next video that's appearing on the screen, because it has a story of betrayal and reversal like you've never seen before.